there are no issues whatsoever between Iran and Israel. And yet, from the time the Ayatollahs came in, they decided to devote the vast majority of their economy, their scientific output, and their military to one goal, which was literally not the defeat, but the destruction and annihilation of the Jewish state and the Jewish people.
I call myself an original Christian. And what I mean by that is just go back to what Jesus taught. He was the least religious person to walk the planet. He was all about love God with all your heart, soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if more of us just did that instead of man-made religion, like you, what you're talking about, for me, it's a relationship.
So every semester when report cards come out, the kids can bring their report card into his store and he gives them rewards. But not just like a piece of gum. If you get an 80 to 90% on your report card in any class, you get whatever you want from the store.
Hi, welcome to the Mandy and Deb show. This is my friend Mandy.
And this is my friend Deb. And together we are
Mandy and Deb. See, a lot of research and went into
focus
that focus
grouping.
groups.
Yeah. A lot of stuff went into that.
Well, we are so glad you're here. By the way, follow us on social media, on Facebook at Mandy ampersand.
Yes.
Because we're fancy, Deb. Not because we're fancy. Don't put that in the middle of the title.
It's a little wordy. We were going to put that in, but then we changed our minds.
Mandy ampersand Deb. And be sure, please, to also subscribe right there. That
Easy
button.
to hit that button because then you won't miss a show. And you really don't want to miss a show, especially today's, because we have a very special guest today.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, we want to jump right into it. And without further ado, I use a clicky thingy because we've got issues. And, much of the issues that have been going on for a while now have been all about Israel, the Middle East, what's going on there, the bombing of the nuclear facilities in Iran, etc. But a lot of times these conversations happen kind of in a vacuum.
Right.
I mean, too often we don't really know the history of the region, what really is going on with Hamas and Gaza and all of that. And that's why I'm so glad that we have our special guest joining us today, and that is Dan Gordon. Dan is a former IDF captain. He served 45 years, all the way back to the Yom Kippur War, to many different initiatives in Israel. He's also an American citizen, and he's a award-winning screenwriter of The Hurricane with Denzel Washington, Wyatt Earp, which we love, with Kevin Costner. So a very diverse kind of Renaissance man. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, want to just kick it off. There's a lot of conflicting information out there about the Middle East. There's a lot of lack of context of, what these different, battles have happened, and obviously the horrendous day of October 7th. You have shared before, and I found this so interesting, a little bit of the history of the region, because many of us think that Iran and Israel have always been at each other. Iran's always been sponsoring terrorism, but that's not the case. Can you tell us a little bit more about the history of that region?
Yeah, the Jewish people and the Persian people, who are the Iranians, have had a peaceful, prosperous relations dating back to 700 BC. The Jews were first brought into Persia after Babylonia conquered Israel. And the Babylonian exile happened, and then Persia conquered Babylonia, and now you have a whole Jewish population in Persia. So literally 1,400 years before Muhammad's mother was born, the Jews and the Persians had peaceful, flourishing relations. The Jews lived very well for most of the time in Persia. After the Muslim conquests in the 7th century, they still continued to live well, even after Iran or Persia became a Shia Muslim country. There were some restrictions that were placed on Jews and some discrimination, but by and large, the Jewish population lived extremely well. Um, in the Bible, it recounts King Cyrus, who was the one who gave the Jews permission to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, and is revered by Jews to this day. In Isaiah, Cyrus is called the Anointed One. He is so, the king of Persia is so respected by the Jewish people. Um, I'm sure most people know, from the Bible, the story of Queen Esther. There was a time when there was a guy named Haman who plotted against the Jews of Persia. Queen Esther was one of the wives of a guy named Ahasuerus, who was also called Xerxes, and she saved the Jewish population, which again flourished. In 1925, the Shah of Iran's ancestor, the Shah Pahlavi, took the throne. And from that point on, any restrictions or discriminatory laws against Jews were abolished in Iran. And the Iranian people and the Jews were extraordinarily friendly, did very well. Even after the state of Israel was established, there was no expulsion of the Jews of Persia. Of Iran, they continued to have very cordial relations. And in fact, the government of Iran and Israel had very cordial relations. There were direct flights between Tehran and Tel Aviv. The relations were, as I say, cordial up until the time of the Ayatollah's revolution in the late 70s. And that's when Iran did this incredible 180-degree turn. Iran is a country, as we talked before, that shares no border with Israel. There's no border dispute with Israel. There's no land dispute with Israel. There are no claims that Israel has imperialist designs on Iran, which is a country of 90 million people, and Israel is a country of 10 million people. So it's not as if Israel is trying to conquer Iran. There are no issues whatsoever between Iran and Israel. And yet, from the time the Ayatollahs came in, they decided to devote the vast majority of their economy, their scientific output, and their military to one goal, which was literally not the defeat, but the destruction and annihilation of the Jewish state and the Jewish people. And they instituted what they called the axis of resistance. They began funding these proxies, who were Iranian proxies, who were supposed to create the ring of fire around Israel. So they financed Hamas, they financed Hezbollah, they financed the militias in Syria, they financed the militias in Iraq, which, by the way, killed hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers and wounded tens of thousands. They financed the Houthis out of Yemen, who have been barring international shipping. All of this was aimed at destroying the state of Israel and annihilating literally every person who was there, and in creating a ballistic missile system that launched more ballistic missiles at Israel than Russia launched at Kiev. So it's a country that has had just almost a demonic possession in its obsession to destroy a state with whom it doesn't share any border of any kind.
Dan, could I ask a question? Because I think a lot of people, especially in the United States, who have very little knowledge of the history of the Middle East, a lot of people don't realize that a vast majority of the Jews, maybe not a vast majority, but a large part of the Jews that are in Israel actually lived in other places in the Middle East. When was it that Jews started to be kicked out of their homeland, wherever that was, whether it was in Iran or Iraq or other areas, to be concentrated in Israel? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Jews have been a fixture of the Middle East for 4,000 years, since the time of Abraham. The vast majority of Israelis are not from Europe or from the United States or North America. They are either from the Middle East or from Africa, where the Ethiopian Jews migrated from the Middle East. In 1948, when Israel declared its independence, in Israel's declaration of independence, it said, "We hold out our hand to our Arab neighbors and our Arab citizens living within the borders of Israel. We don't want a war. We will have a society that grants the religious freedom to everyone, regardless of religion or national origin. We want to live with you guys in peace." The Declaration of Independence literally occurred at 12:01 in the morning, the moment the British mandate ended on May 14th in 1948. While the Declaration of Independence was being read, Tel Aviv was being bombed by the Egyptians and by the Syrians. As soon as Israel declared independence, it was invaded by the armies of Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Transjordan. There were units from Morocco who came to join the fight as well. It was, for the Muslim Arabs, a holy war of annihilation, in which they said, "We are going to make the Mediterranean red with the blood of the Jews." My adoptive father was within that war, and I was born in the United States but raised in Israel, and all of my classmates' parents were in that war as well. And in addition to the regular armies that were fighting, there was a civil war between the Jewish residents of Israel and the Arab residents of Israel, who were very much bent on their Jewish neighbors' destruction. As a result of that war, there were about 700,000 Palestinian Arabs who fled what became the state of Israel. And people have said, "Oh, Israel put them in refugee camps." It never happened. Absolutely never happened. When those Palestinian Arabs fled to their brother Arab countries, like they fled to Jordan, instead of absorbing them and saying, "You're the same religion as we are, you're the same culture as we are. Most of you are tied to us by family ties in Jordan. You're literally cousins or second cousins." Instead of saying, "We'll absorb you into our society," the government of Jordan, with the UN's help, put those people into refugee camps. The government of Egypt, with the UN's help, put those people into refugee camps in Gaza, and they made Gaza one big refugee camp. The government of Syria created Palestinian refugee camps. The government of Lebanon created Palestinian refugee camps. And there are laws to this day in Lebanon that no Palestinian quote unquote refugee is allowed to become a professional of any kind. They can't become a doctor, they can't become a lawyer. So their brother Arab states, literally to use them as a tool to say, "Oh, there's this horrible refugee problem," instead of absorbing them and saying, "Come, my brothers, we'll take you into our country and give you a home," they put them into ghettos. They put them into camps and said, "You can't come out of here. You're not going to get Lebanese citizenship. You're not going to get Syrian citizenship. You're not going to get Egyptian citizenship. You're going to be a perpetual refugee." And the United Nations created, there at the end of World War II, there were between 40 and 60 million refugees in the world. 40 and 60 million refugees. By 1961, there was not one refugee of World War II that hadn't been resettled. And yet the United Nations could not resettle 700,000 Palestinian refugees in other countries in now 75 years. There's one agency that deals with all the refugees in the world. That's called the UN High Commissioner on Refugees. The only exception to that is the Palestinians. They have a separate agency within the UN called UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Welfare Association. So 99.999% of all the refugees in the world are dealt with by the UN High Commissioner on Refugees. UNRWA was established to perpetuate Palestinian refugees
And
and
Dan,
never let them be absorbed.
yeah, and Dan, I think it's interesting because I've interviewed before mom of Eyelet Samarano, whose son Yonatan Samarano there's a videotape of him being his body dragged from the Supernova Film Festival and put into the back of a vehicle by an UNRWA worker. And there's reports that 1,500 of those UN relief workers are actually with Hamas. You know, in the remaining time that we have, a question I had, because a lot of people also now are talking about how do you rebuild? What do you do in Gaza? You had a great point about the problem previously that happened after the last war was all the money went to Hamas. And can you share with our viewers what Hamas did with the money the last time they were in charge of receiving the rebuilding funds for Gaza?
Yeah, you had after the 2014 war, you had uh, between 2014 and 2023, I think by most estimates, it's around $9 billion went into Gaza from Europe, the United States, the United Nations, the Palestine Authority, Qatar, what have you. That money didn't build hospitals and schools and institutes of peace. It didn't even really rebuild neighborhoods. There was 1 million tons of cement and steel that went into Gaza, and it was used to build 500 miles of terrorist tunnel infrastructure. There are two Gazas. There's an above ground Gaza and there's a below ground Gaza. That 500 miles is bigger than the London metro system. And it makes Hamas almost impregnable. A year ago, I did a documentary, a 7-part documentary about the war in Gaza. And I was attached to Israeli combat engineers. We went into neighborhoods where they were basically Potemkin villages. They were phantom neighborhoods. They were partially completed housing structures that had no plumbing in them, had no electricity, because they were never meant to be lived in.
Right.
These were actually neighborhoods that were built to camouflage the tunnels that were being dug underneath them. Every one of these buildings was a fighting position that was connected by the tunnels. Hamas's plan was a good one. It was, we're going to stage this massacre knowing that Israel will come into Gaza, and they're going to come into a prepared battlefield. None of our terrorist army will wear uniforms, and they're not going to carry weapons. They're going to walk around in civilian clothes saying, please don't shoot, we're civilians. Then they go into one of the houses where the weapons are waiting for them. They fire an RPG or rockets at Israeli forces or civilians. Then they escape through the tunnels and booby trap that house. So when the Israeli forces come in looking for them, they blow up the house on them. And I was, like I said, I was with combat engineers where we found rocket launchers. And it literally, I have it on film as we uncovered the rocket launchers. There's a cord leading from the rocket launchers that we used to fire rockets at Tel Aviv. These were long-range rockets. They went directly into one of these villas. So the guy can sit inside that villa with his family if he's got them there, push a button, fire the rockets to Israel. And if Israel retaliates, oh my God, you just hit a civilian neighborhood, you barbarians. And he never has to leave what is basically a fighting position. And then we found the tunnels that connected these fighting positions, these houses. There was an art museum.
The most horrifying thing about the tunnels, for me, in my mind, is that they wouldn't let the civilians go into the tunnels to use them as bomb shelters. You know, I have family in Israel. There's bomb shelters everywhere in Israel, but they have 500 miles of tunnels and would not let women and children into them. That, in my mind, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about this particular enemy. They don't care about life. They don't care about the lives of the Palestinian people. So
It's actually worse than that. Part of their battle plan, and they've admitted it, they've said it very proudly. Part of their battle plan is to inflict as many casualties on their own population as possible So that allows them to carry out acts of terrorism while wearing the mantle of victimhood.
Yeah.
Ismail Haniyeh, who is the not lamented former leader of Hamas, said, "We need the blood of the children who inspire us in our revolutionary fervor."
Yeah. Well, and thank you
So,
so. Yeah, thank you, Dan. I mean, I think I always remember. I think it was Benjamin Netanyahu who said, Israel uses missiles to protect civilians. Hamas uses civilians to protect their missiles because they even put it underneath. Our time's up, but I so appreciate it. I think this is really incredibly valuable for our viewers to know the background and why when someone holds up a picture of a Palestinian child who, is tragically been hurt, it's not because of Israel, who, by the way, drops leaflets and says, "We're coming, please get out of the way." We understand where it's really from. But thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for all of this great information. Thank you for your continuing service and doing what you do also as a filmmaker to keep this in the light with your documentary. We really appreciate it.
thank you so much for having me, and God bless you guys and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. God bless you as well. I find this really interesting too, Mandy, because when we look at what he's talking about, I mean, that's what's so important. I shared this story, I think, here on the show the last time around, but when we were in DC, we left the Holocaust Museum. It was the last place that we were leaving.
Yeah.
And outside the Holocaust Museum, and this is 2 weeks right after the Boulder situation with the Molotov cocktail and all that horrible stuff, we walk out. I've got my suitcase because we're heading to the lift. And right outside are these protesters holding up pictures of Palestinian children who've been wounded. And I'm just shaking my head at them because I'm dumbfounded. I'm so emotional after the museum. And they said, "Why are you shaking your head?" And I said, "Because the Holocaust is back there and that's misinformation." And then they said, "Well, we're American Jews, and so we have a right to say this." And I said, "Well, you're all the more misinformed because that's because of Hamas." And so we've got to make sure that in the court of public opinion, we hope that you take this information you've learned and share it, because we all want the same thing. We want civilians to be protected.
I'm going to take it one step further. One of the reasons that I asked Dan about specifically the fact that most Israelis have come from other nations, because after that attack in 1947, all of those other nations started expelling Jewish people.
Yes.
So when people say, "Go back to where you came from," they're not allowed there because other Muslim countries will not allow Jews to come and resettle in their traditional homelands.
Mm-hmm.
And too many people don't understand that. Where we have an entire UN organization dedicated to Palestinian refugees. Do you know how many organizations were dedicated to helping all of those Jews resettle in Israel? 0.
Yes.
So the notion that somehow Israel is the oppressor long term in this tragic drama that we're watching is insane. And it's absurd. And people need to educate themselves more about the history of the region and how the Nazis came in after World War II and relocated to the Middle East. Lots of good stuff in the history of Israel.
There is. And by the way, Israel is the only country in the Middle East where Muslims, Christians, and Jews all live together peacefully. And that is something that actually we should be celebrating because it is democratically elected and reflects our values in many ways. So, all right, that was the We've Got Issues. Shake it off, ladies.
Click
Shake
it
it
to
off.
something else
It's
there.
important. Here we go. Ready?
Here we go.
We've got stuff.
I'm kind of excited about this topic.
Okay.
Even though, can I say what I said to you yesterday?
Yes.
Okay.
Take away.
So we were talking about what we wanted to talk about on the show today. And I said, what would you think about talking about our faith? And I am not a person who wears my faith on my sleeve. No one is ever going to accuse me of being some kind of evangelist who is trying to proselytize to you and change your mind. But I realized something over the last few years, and that is I think I have a very strong relationship with God. It may not match up with your relationship with God or whatever you think that might be, but I spend a lot of time talking to God and asking for strength and guidance and wisdom. And I get a lot from my relationship with God. And yet I have, over the last few years, been very purposeful about not talking about my relationship with God and not talking about faith, because it's almost like we as a society decided that that's not cool or that's played out or whatever the kids today are saying right now. And then I started reading how more young people are going back to church. The church attendance had been going down pretty steadily, not dramatically, but pretty steadily for many, many years. Over the last couple of years, church attendance, and these are people who go to church every week, okay? So that's the standard. church attendance has finally plateaued and it's stopped dropping. And what's causing that or what's preventing more dropping is young people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, if young people are talking about their faith, well, then it's cool again. So as an old woman, like I can talk about my faith. And I just thought it might be interesting for us to share our faith journeys.
I think it's
because
great.
I think everybody has a faith journey. I think
Yes.
faith itself is a journey.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. I love when you brought that up. And by the way, I do now wear mine on my sleeve. My husband and I got one tattoo on our first anniversary, and we just had our 25th, and we got matching tattoos. And this says Micah 6:8, and just got a few days ago. And the reason why is because Micah 6:8 sums it up for me. It says, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. And that kind of summarizes a lot. But I love that you brought this up, because especially having run for political office, I was always kind of careful about it, because what I don't like is when people use their faith to kind of like score points. To me, that's, it says don't use the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah.
Some of that's profanity. I don't like when people want to GD someone, because I think there's power there if you actually say it. But I also think people have abused it, and particularly when you presume that everyone you're talking to agrees with you. We're not presuming that you agree with us necessarily, but I think it's important, and I think it came all the way back to in the old days when everyone was super polite, unlike what we talked about, in our culture in other ways. Well, what were the two things you're never supposed to talk about? Religion, politics.
Yes.
And now the only people who weren't talking about it tended to be those who were more right of center and were, more traditional faith. So I think it's a great topic. I'll jump in. I'll tell you, start with my faith journey. So I grew up as a Christian. I grew up on a Lowry Air Force Base. And so I never knew what I was, because we only had two types of services, Catholic and Protestant. And depending on who was rotating in, it'd be Lutheran, it'd be whatever. I didn't even know what it meant. But it wasn't until I was in middle school that I first understood what it meant for me to have a relationship with Christ. And somebody told me when I was 12, I'm like, well, I feel gypped. Nobody told me till now. So that's when I really consider I became a Christian. And I was this activist. And my friend Cindy and McKay and I, when we found out we weren't allowed to pray in school, we're like, well, heck with that. And so we went into the Commons and knelt down and started praying and made our teachers really, really nervous.
God, she was like an activist for God. That's what you were.
I'm kind of wired that way. But we did it for ourselves. It wasn't to put it on anyone else. You fast forward, I traveled with Youth for Christ International. The story I share about the Soviet Union, that's why I was there. And it was an amazing experience. And we just saw all kinds of miraculous things happen. Then I had my delayed adolescence. And I did go through a period, and it really happened when my oldest brother, who is literally a rocket scientist, challenge the intellectual reasons behind my faith. And what I realized is if I was a bodybuilder, my faith was this big upper body and my legs were this spindly
little chicken legs.
I know. Knock me right over, because he would say things like, it doesn't make any sense to believe in God.
Right.
So I actually ended up reading everything I could. I went to Denver Seminary for a brief period to study apologetics, and I read everything I could get my hand on. And what I began to realize, Mandy, was, okay, so here's the world, right? Nobody was there at creation, so we can't prove it. But when you add it up, and it even says in the Bible that God's given examples of himself everywhere, I realized to look at it, even Einstein said, thinking the universe just happened would be like walking along a beach, finding a watch and saying, oh, that just happened. There's all this order. And that's when I began to come back to my faith. And it's been stronger ever since then. But I will say this. Whenever anybody usually says to me, oh, you're an evangelical Christian, I don't like that term, because our religious conversations have gotten laden with so many things that mean something different to someone else. So I started my own terminology. I tended to be kind of like, activist about this too. And I would tell people I call myself an original Christian. And what I mean by that is just go back to what Jesus taught. He was the least religious person to walk the planet. He was all about love God with all your heart, soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if more of us just did that instead of man-made religion, like what you're talking about, for me, it's a relationship. That's really what it is for me. And I am so grateful that I can pray also and get guidance, because I'm not always the smartest tool in the shed. So I need that.
Mine is a little more, I would say mine is, I wouldn't say bumpy, just circuitous. Like, we did a lot of this because
I want to hear.
I grew up Catholic in a town full of Baptists. Okay. Like
wow.
to the point where I went to church with my best friend a lot because she was Baptist. And so then I had another friend who was Methodist. So even though I grew up Catholic and I went through the whole rigmarole of Catholicism, I still always dabbled. And it wasn't necessarily looking for a different faith. It was just kind of looking for their thoughts on God, right?
Yeah.
Catholicism, at least when I was a Catholic, and if you're a Catholic and it works for you, I'm very pleased. I'm not down on the Catholic Church. It just wasn't for me, right? I wanted to find out sort of like the bigger picture of God.
Yeah.
And so since then, I became a flight attendant when I was 21 years old. And as I traveled around the world, one of the things I would always do is go visit churches, because everything you want to know about a culture, you can learn from their food and their religion. And talking to other people about their different religious experiences. And it's very odd to talk to someone who's a Buddhist and find out that so many of the tenets of Buddhism are based in the same kind of kindness that Christ talked about. And you talk to someone who's Hindu and you find the similarities in their faith as well. And so I kind of did this winding path, and I still am not a regular church attendee. I'm probably not going to be. I'm not a joiner, but there were a few pivotal points in my life, important people. Number one, I went to an evangelical Christian summer camp when I was a kid, Camp Dovewood, still around in Florida. It's amazing. It was founded by a woman named Roberta Richmond. We were in camper class number 1. She is one of the people that I have met in my life that if you've ever heard the phrase, filled with the Spirit of the Lord, Roberta Richmond is filled with the Spirit of the Lord. She glows from her love of God. And seeing that and seeing how powerful her relationship was when I was a kid was a very powerful thing for me, because when you see someone who is joyful and has a wonderful life and is living their dreams and doing the things that is important to them, and they have that incredibly rock solid relationship with Christ and God, it is a very appealing thing. Pivot point number 2 was my experiences traveling around the world and talking to people and realizing that most faiths have more in common than they do apart. That was a big deal for me, because then you start to think, what if it is just one big God, right? We're all just talking to him in a different way. And then when my daughter was born, this was really powerful. So I was on the radio the day I had my daughter. No, I didn't have her on the.
Wow, that's impressive.
Okay, but I know that we're almost out of time, but I got to tell this story because it's really important. So I'm doing my show prep that morning. I'm enormously pregnant. I'm 38 weeks pregnant. It's hot. It's Florida. It's miserable. I'm just ready to be done. And I read this USA Today article in the paper, like actual paper, and it was during the economic recession of 2009. I'm reading this article in the paper about people giving up babies for adoption because they can't afford them. And in one of the people that they interviewed that was adopting, this woman had a stillborn at 38 weeks. And I'm 38 weeks along, and I realized that I had not been feeling my daughter move, and she'd been very, very active. So I freaked myself out, called my doctor. I went in, ended up having an emergency C-section. My daughter almost died. If I had not read that article, she most assuredly would have died. So I'm on the radio on Thursday morning. I'm not on the radio on Friday morning. And everybody finds out I've had this baby. It's in the NICU. My listeners started praying.
Oh, that's great.
They got their churches to pray. People around the world were praying. We had a Buddhist monk who was the uncle of one of my husband's military men. He chanted for her in his way, asking God to help her. And her recovery from how she was born to when we left the hospital 11 days, the doctor said, this is the most miraculous turnaround that we've ever seen. So I feel like I have experienced God.
Yes.
And so, gosh, I didn't mean to get all like.
We're going to have a hug moment. We don't do this very often.
But since then, she's 16 now, so this was a while ago. Since then, my walk with God has gotten closer and closer and closer. Yes. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to, be able to spout a Bible verse. Although when he said Esther, one of my favorite Bible verses is from Esther, but that's a story for another time.
Born for such a time as this.
Yes, I know. But, and I got to tell you guys, like, it gives me so much peace to offload to God. Because as my late mother-in-law used to say, when you can't sleep at night, just give it to God, because he's going to be up anyway. And those instances have made my life better. Yeah. They've made me a happier person. They've made me a stronger person. They've made me more compassionate. They've made me able to reach out to people in a way that I was not really able to do before. And whenever I see these angry people, and they're all wrapped up in politics, and everything is horrible and everything is bad, I just think to myself, just give God a chance. Yeah. Just give it a chance and see if it helps, because the happiest people I know in my life are the people of the strongest faith.
Yeah.
And that is just a fact. And so, and studies have borne that out.
They have.
People of faith are happier than people who are not. And so if you're lost and you're looking and you're trying to figure something out, go to a church. If you don't like it, go to another church. Talk to someone that you know that has strong faith. Tap into it and see if it can give you what it has given me, which is just so much. I can't even begin.
I love that you brought this up. And the way I look at it this way too is, that was an amazing story. And we were told that we could never have children. And I remember at the same time, someone in my family got pregnant on the street as an alcoholic, and we were being told we couldn't have kids. And I just remember thinking, this isn't fair. This isn't right. Now, we did end up having children, miraculously, within 2 years, which is why ours are super close together, the backwoods Arkansas style. They're 14 months apart. I don't know what you call it. But here's the thing. I really believe, and in that moment when we were told we couldn't have children, God would have given me peace if we had kids or we didn't have kids. It's not always about the outcome. You and I have had a great outcome in some of our stories, but if you're struggling with something, I don't believe that when you have faith, everything's something hunky-dory. In fact, you go through a lot of the same things because this world is fallen. It's got issues. People have free will choice. But what the difference really makes is peace. And whenever I hear of somebody going through some kind of tragedy, I always pray for the peace that passes understanding. That's because it's beyond what we can understand. And that's really, for me, what faith is about: guidance, peace, knowing at the end of the day, he's the boss, I'm not. That was really, when I say apologetics, it all got summed up in this: he's God, you're not. I mean, that was really,
there you go.
That was really it.
And as for prayer, sometimes you pray and you pray really hard and you pray so hard, and sometimes the answer is still no.
Yeah.
And God you go, okay, I know you have a better path for me. I know you have a door to open. It is easy to offload the aggravation if you just let it happen.
Well, and here's a great line, and my husband quotes it a lot. Believe it or not, it came from Yellowstone. I'm not saying that it's the great theological. Go to church instead,
the
right?
great evangelical show of our era.
I'm not saying it's Sage, Taylor Sheridan. I'm not saying he's got all the answers, but he did this voiceover way back in, it was the 18 whatever show it was.
1883.
That one. I always get 1883 and 1923 mixed up. But anyway, 1883. And I do agree with this. He said, when you pray, God has 3 answers: yes, not yet, or I have something better. And I truly believe that. Even if we feel like it's a no, I think when you pray, you see things in a different way. And then you perhaps see, wow, at the end of the day, when I went to Hollywood, I wanted to be an Academy Award-winning actor and marry Tom Cruise, for goodness sake.
Ew.
And thank goodness God said, I have something better for you.
And boy, did
Which
he.
I know, right?
Yeah,
and
he
taller
did.
too. Sorry, Tom, not picking on you. But anyway, I think God says, yes, not yet, I have something better. And when we release that, man, the peace that comes. So I love that you brought this up.
I just, I'm tired of not talking about it. I'm
Well,
tired
there
of
you go.
and like I said, you can be a Christian who goes to church every weekend. You can be a Buddhist. You can be whatever you want to be. And my friend Father Mike, who is an Episcopalian priest who is just amazing, he said, God will meet you wherever you are. God will meet you however you need to be met. God will meet you with whatever faith you need to follow. God is going to be there. He's ready for you. So,
and I have one last I'm quoting the Hollywood theologians now. Here's what I love. Chris Pratt, of all people, the MTV
he actually
Awards.
is legit though.
He is. But what I love, he put it so simply. It was the MTV Choice Awards or whatever. He gets up and he goes, these are the Pratt rules to live by. I won't share all of them. Some of them have to do with how do you go to the bathroom during a party, which I don't need to get into. But he said this, he goes, there is a God. He loves you. You have a soul. Take care of it. Pray. It's good for your soul. And I thought, that just summed it up, because I really think
we should have Chris Pratt on the show.
Let's do.
Chris, call us.
Chris,
call us. We're ready for you, Chris Pratt.
Okay, well, that is, believe it or not, we've got stuff. And now we're going to go to good news. And if there's any more good news than this, I don't know what it could possibly be.
Well, I'm going
go
first.
Ahead. You go first.
I've got this one because there's a little corner bodega in Long Island,
Ooh,
New York.
Nice.
And it is owned by a guy whose name I'm going to massacre. His name is Whale Al-Sulwi. Whale Al-Sulwi.
It looks kind of like that. I'll
perhaps
vouch for
an Arab
that.
last name. But he is very invested in the kids in his community. So every semester when report cards come out, The kids can bring their report card into his store and he gives them rewards. But not just like a piece of gum. If you get an 80 to 90% on your report card in any class, you get whatever you want from the store. So you get to pick something from the store. If you get 70 to 80% on your report card, you get $10 worth of stuff. And if you show improvement from report card to report card, he'll let you pick out a little something from the store.
Wow.
If you are from 90 or higher, so if you get an A on your report card, he gives you your pick of goodies from the store, a t-shirt, and a $100 bill. Because he wants his kids to go to school. These are not his children, by the way. He wants his children in his neighborhood to go to school, to learn, to be something with their lives. And he thought, this is the best way I can do it.
Is that, is it grandfathered in? Because I did get a lot of A's. I'd like to go
If you can dig out your report card, Deborah, I'm sure that Wall will give you something sweet from the store.
I love that. Boy, just a person in his community, and I bet he will never know till he gets to heaven to follow it up.
Yeah.
All the kids will say, you motivated me.
Yeah.
Thank you for the encouragement, because they may not get it somewhere else. Mine is on a completely different topic. So there's actually some research that's groundbreaking right now in the medical world in Sydney, and they've been studying Parkinson's for about 10 years. They identified a protein that does something different in those with Parkinson's, and they've been doing trials with mice. These mice are doing well, so don't anybody feel badly if you're with PETA. In fact, the turnout of what's happened with these mice has been so revolutionary that they're about ready to go to clinical trials. And while Parkinson's is complex, it may actually be the beginning of the end of this really terrible, debilitating disease. And I think what I love about this is because we talk about the big headlines, Mandy. We talk about, the celebrities, the good, the bad, the political, all of that. There are people working every day behind the scenes quietly working on amazing things, and sometimes they just need a shout out. We'll never know probably the name of those people that are probably getting myopic view through the their little telescope or whatever they're working on, their microscope. Thank you for helping me.
Little telescope. You've just renamed
More coffee.
Scientific equipment. Little telescope. Okay.
This is not a science show.
No,
anyway,
it's not.
But anyway, they're in their microscope, and we may never ever see their faces. But isn't that amazing? I mean, this is going
that they use tiny telescopes to cure Parkinson's. Parkinson's,
it's like the pirate.
It's a wonderful time to be alive right now when it comes to medical breakthroughs.
It is.
It's fantastic.
Okay,
all right.
Bringing it down.
There we go.
All right. What should I start with my random act of kindness?
Your random act of kindness, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm now serious, and it does not have to do with telescopes. Okay, travel season is in full swing. So when you get on the plane next time and you see somebody struggling with that suitcase, getting it up there, I had to travel by myself recently. I overpacked my suitcase, and man, I was having a little bit of challenge, and somebody just jumped up and helped. And it was really nice. And oftentimes we see those people who are like the elderly trying to lift it, or a mom with a baby here. And you see all these, I don't mean to pick on the guys, but these burly guys sitting there, or maybe, an able-bodied woman over there sitting there. Just maybe the next time, if you're capable, help somebody put their suitcase up. It's amazing how, especially when you see these moms and dads traveling with babies, also don't give them the evil eye when their baby cries. They cannot actually really control that. But just help them put their suitcase up. It's a little thing to do, but man, I think it would make somebody's day.
I will talk about why that is one of my greatest pet peeves. Not that people don't help you, but that people like you overpack. That's a former flight attendant thing for me.
No. It wasn't too thick. I just had a heavy pair of shoes in there. I want to clarify. I followed the rules. I thought it was just the right thickness. I didn't shove it.
Anyway, okay, my random act of kindness is really, really easy. I want you to buy a little treat for someone that you care about. It doesn't have to be big, it could be a candy bar. I don't care what you do. But then take it over them and say, you know what, I was thinking about you and I thought maybe you would enjoy a little day brightener. It could be someone you work with, it could be your husband, it could be your wife, it could be whatever. But that sign of out of the blue, nobody saw it coming kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that can really make someone's day. It's the same as a compliment. Mm-hmm. My son, my oldest son, let me brag on him for just 1 second.
Go ahead.
He is the king of compliments to strangers. He tells people all the time, ooh, I love your glasses. Oh, that jacket looks great on you. Just random things. You guys should see people light up when he does that. And we're so afraid to say, wow, you look amazing. Don't be afraid. Do something little, tiny, small thing for someone and watch their face light up, and you too will benefit from this.
And by the way, You look amazing.
You look amazing too.
I
that
did.
color is great
Thank
for you.
you. Will you help me
check,
with my
we're done.
overpacked suitcase?
Here, take a piece of paper. There you go. All right, kids, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Follow us on social media.
Yes.
Mandy on Facebook, Mandy _Deb on Facebook. Go ahead and hang out with us there. We'll be there with you, and we'll be back next time.
We will indeed. And you take care and God bless you.